We didn't start the Gemara yet.
No, today we're starting the Gemara. Exactly. Put this like that. Okay. Today, B'ezrat Hashem, Masechet Shabbat, we're learning Ayin Zayin with Aleph. And we're going to Ayin Zayin. What's Ayin Zayin? Oz.
השם עוד פעם ייתן.
גם זה עבודה זרה, אבל עוז.
ויתנו בקולו כל עוז.
B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, we're going to have 3 sections in today's learning. אנחנו מתחילים מהגמרא.
עין זין, עולם הזה.
עולם הזה. Ayin Vav Amud Bet, the bottom at the Gemara. We're going to have 3 sections in today's learning. Very interesting. First section we're going to learn is, we said in the Mishnah, מה אתה צריך? Oh, Gemara here.
חלק שלישי?
Oh, here, this is actually probably better, bigger. You want this or that?
No, I like
Is that?
מה זה שני?
That's it, yeah. The first section we're going to learn is, the question is, when we said in the Mishnah, Hamotzi yain kedei mezigat hakos. How much is kedei mezigat hakos? We're going to discuss that in the Gemara. And then we're going to discuss, related, is also what would be kedei mezigat hakos, liot chayav b'shabbat, hotza'ah, shal yain karush. Ma ze yain karush? Congealed. We're going to discuss that case. כמו jelly. Yeah, something like that.
קרוש זה כמו דם. קרוש.
Exactly. Karush.
When it become like hard.
Like what do they call the fruit leathers or something like that? When wine becomes like that.
Fruit leather.
So we're going to also discuss how much of that kind of wine will you be chayav for hotza'ah and Shabbat. You can make wine apparently like that.
אבל איך אתה מוזג את זה if it's solid?
You can't.
זה מוצק.
You have to liquefy it 100%.
כמו like a whole milk.
Yeah.
Because it's come like a cream cheese at the beginning and then you mix it with fat or something.
Lishonot. It's very interesting at the end here. You know, the Tanaim back in the day, the people who learned the Mishnayot, they learned it Ba'al Peh. So there were certain words that it was either an Aleph or an Ayin, but you said it the same way, it sounded similar. So there's going to be discussions here in a few different words in Mishnayot, what's the right way to write it. Because even though it might sound similar, there's perhaps a chiluk, and we're going to bring proofs from Psukim in order to explain that. Okay, so let's just remember, where are we holding here? We started the Mishnah in the 8th parak yesterday.
מחלוקת עם רבי שמעון.
מחלוקת הנקם Rabbi Shimon. We're not going to get back into that now though. But the point is, we said in order to be chayav on Shabbat, you have to carry a food or a drink in a size that is chashuv. Now what's chashuv? Important. So we said in the Mishnah, what's the usual, previous parak, we said for foods, what's the measure?
רביעית.
Gogeret, which is a dried fig.
For food.
For food bichlal is dried fig.
משקיעים
And that's
אין
halacha
שיעורים.
למoshe מסיני.
זה אמרת.
Mashkim is different. Mashkim is not halacha למoshe מסיני. So it was given masur l'chachamim to decide what's considered chashuv. So in this, we have a bit of an interesting discussion because sometimes drinks are used for drinking, and though some of those same drinks also have another tashmish, another shimush, which
מה אמרנו
could be
אתמול לדוגמה זה הדבש היה?
לא, המים עם המשחה.
mayim. We spoke about different things, right?
נכון, דבש גם כן למכה.
So that was the discussion, machloket in the Mishnah.
יין גם כן אמרנו.
So what do we say about yayin? Very good. What do we say about yayin?
יין חלב
Yayin, we
ודבש.
said, hamotzi yayin, Tanakama said, kidei mezigat hakos. So what's kidei mezigat hakos? So,
אמרת בגלל שזה היה, it was very rough, so they have to mix it with water.
excellent. So we're talking about undiluted wine. We're talking about wine, not like today you buy Bartanura.
It's called יין פטישים. Like it's hammer you. פטיש.
But the point, I hear, Shamea. But the point is that the wine we're talking about here is not wine that's mixed with water. That's not what we're talking about here. When it says in the Mishnah, Motzi yayin kedei mezigat hakos, what does it mean? It means you have the undiluted product.
Very condensed.
Very condensed, very strong.
Very strong.
How do you drink it? You mix it with water.
מזיגת
It's mezigat hakos.
כן.
So how much wine is that להיות חייב בשבת? להיות חייב חטאת?
רביעית, לא?
זה השאלה.
לפני שהוא מזוג?
לפני שהוא מזוג. זה השאלה. אז המשנה אמר,
מה זאת אומרת לפני שהוא
כדי
מזוג?
מזיגת הכוס, אז כמה יין?
כמה אני צריך לשפור בשביל להיות חייב?
How much do you have to take out on שבת להיות חייב?
ביין שהוא לא מזוג.
אבל אני צריך למזוג אותו.
לא, מזוג זה אומר שלא יערבבו אותו במים. זה pure wine.
אז איך תוציא אותו? בתוך הבקבוק.
Okay, so you have this you have this strong, undiluted wine. Rashi calls it yain chai.
When you say
Very strong.
undiluted, it means it doesn't mix
Without
with...
water, bli mayim. לפני שאתה מוזג את המים.
It's a big, one things that Rav Ovadia make a noise when he start. They want almost chas shalom to ההפך מהחיים. When he went to chuppah, he make shahakol on the wine. He went to chuppah.
מישהו אמר שהכל?
הוא אמר שהכל, people
Because it
want...
was too diluted.
was too much water,
So
and
that's too
everybody
much.
go against him. What are you doing? You're gonna keep the business.
בטל ברוב, לא?
I'm sorry, it's
But
more
that,
than,
if you
it's a
put
mind
more
valve.
than half, let's say, of water, it already
Yes.
loses its status.
The one of
But
the
point
things
is here
are-
we're talking about to be chayav on Shabbat for hotza'ah.
Yain
It has
chai.
to be yain chai. How much of that is considered chashuv?
Okay.
So the Mishnah said kedei mizigat hakos. How much is that? הבנת השאלה?
Okay.
אני מבין את זה, but I assume that probably because it's very strong, יש לזה חשיבות even with a small portion compared
okay,
to
so
the...
that's very good. That's what we're going to get into here.
Because you
Meaning-
say
one
undiluted,
second. We
so
know.
it-
Okay, so let's take this into account.
People don't
Okay.
drink it as is?
בסוף המשנה, you can't drink it as is. לא שותים את זה לבד. בסוף המשנה אמרנו, וכל שאר המשקים ברביעית.
כן.
So אנחנו יודעים כדי מזיגת הכוס זה
פחות.
פחות מרביעית. הבנת את זה?
כן,
Because
כן.
otherwise
אם
what
זה
he's saying-
רביעית, אז מה כבר
So
חידשת
this
לי
is
פה?
less than a revit, obviously. So it has to. That's what we're going to try to figure out. How much are we talking about? Let's see. Says the Gemara. Tana. So the Tosefta, which again, it's a Braita that was explaining the Mishnah. That's it. The Tosefta explained how much is Kedei Mizigat HaKos. Kedei Mizigat Kos Yafeh. What are we talking about over here? It's enough wine that can mix into a kos yafeh. What is a kos yafeh? Umay kos yafeh? Kos shel bracha. Kos yafeh is kos shel bracha. What is kos shel bracha? It's not your Coca-Cola. Kos shel bracha is for Birkat HaMazon.
Size of this one.
1 second. So kos shel bracha is for Birkat HaMazon.
84
They would
גרם.
hold it was called kos yafeh. Rashi explains over here, based on the Gemara Masechet Brachot, there were 10 hidurim they would do to that cup in order to make it extra beautiful. Why? Because it was kos shel bracha they would use for Birkat HaMazon.
Yeah.
Achshav, how big is kos shel bracha?
80 something
That's what we're going to discuss
גרם.
now.
בעניין של כוס.
Minyan shel
גימטריה
kos.
של כוס.
So says the Gemara.
86 גרם.
That's the kos that mizigat. How much raw wine do you need in order to make a kos shel bracha? How much is a kos shel bracha? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua, kos shel bracha tzarich sheyehe bo rova revi'it.
רוב
It needs to
הרביעית.
be quarter of revi'it. Now what's a revi'it? A quarter of a lug. Revi'it is a quarter of a lug, which means your kiddush cup, let's just call it that, the bare minimum for your kiddush cup is a revi'it halug.
So it's 116.
כמה זה לוג?
1 second, before we get to that, how much
116,
that is?
116.
How much wine are you using in that cup of diluted wine mixed with water? A rovav revi'it, which means it's 1/16 of a lug.
אוקיי.
הבנת את זה? כדי שימזגנו,
רבע של לוג?
כדי שימזגנו ויעמוד על רביעית, in order that afterwards, when you mix it together, it becomes a revi'it alug like it's supposed to be. Okay, so Rav is now going to explain exactly what that means. But הבנת את זה?
כן.
You have now like this. Now we have a little bit of a geder we explained in the Mishnah. If somebody goes out with undiluted wine, he goes out with this raw wine product.
Yeah,
We don't really have this today so much, but this raw wine product, how much is it? Enough to make a cup, which will be a kos shel bracha. Well, what's a kos shel bracha? Revi'it of a lug. How much wine do you use in that revi'it alug? Meaning there's also water. It's a rova of a revi'it. So how much is that? 1/16 of a lug is going to be the amount of wine in order to, of raw, undiluted wine, to be chayav for hotza'ah on Shabbat.
But when you say raw, I'm just trying to understand, like, I went to a winery a few months ago.
Right.
How it's become solid?
No, it's not solid. It's not solid.
Liquid.
It's a liquid, but it's very condensed. More like you said before, like condensed milk or something like that. It's a very heavy.
Concentrated.
You have to mix it. Concentrated. You have to mix water in there to drink.
כמו פטל, שאתה לוקח את התרכיז.
Exactly. But הבנת את זה?
You have to mix it with water to להטעים את זה.
Exactly. You can't
To
drink it.
really
Maybe it's
able to
too
drink it.
strong.
Too strong.
כן, כן, כן.
So now let's see. So let's explain this now. Amar Rava, says Rava. So Rava comes along, he wants to explain to us what exactly is going on over here. Before we see Rava, sorry, Rashi says over here, Kedei sheyimzegenu, what is that? B'mayin, with water, shlosha chalakim mayin, ve'echad yayin. So this is the yesod we're going to go with now.
שליש,
What was the
רבע.
normal way to mix wine? They used
Quarter.
1% water, and 1 part water, 1 part yayin, 3 parts water. That's what it was.
רבע.
Which is
רבע
reva.
ושלושה רבעים?
Exactly. So 1/4 was
וואין.
יין חי.
yayin chai, very
והשאר
strong,
מים.
and the rest was made out of water. Exactly. True.
tremendously strong.
Very strong. Oh, so now if you go out on Shabbat, what are you carrying to be chayav? That 1 part wine,
Yes.
not the water. That 1 part wine.
אבל הוא חייב גם אם הוא מוציא מים, עם היין פחות מזה, לא?
He's not going out with water in this case.
Let's say the amount of wine
Yeah.
is less and the amount of water is higher.
He's not going out. Oh, well, that might not be. He's
לא
not
מצטרפים?
carrying. הוא לא מוציא את המים. אנחנו מדברים
מוציא
על
רק יין
היין
חי.
חי.
אבל כמה הוא
Okay,
יצטרך
let's make
להוציא
up a
כדי
case.
להיות חייב?
Let's make a case. היה שבת, והוא רצה ללכת לחבר שלו, למזוג את היין חי שהיה לו, כי הוא לא יכול לשתות את זה. הוא לא יכול לשתות את זה. אז הוא לקח את היין חי. מה זה יין חי? זה קצת יין, אבל זה מאוד מאוד חזק. הוא לא יכול לשתות את זה. הוא לקח את זה לחבר שלו. אבל עכשיו הוא הבין, רגע, אני מוציא משהו בשבת. האם אני חייב? אז הוא הלך לחבר שלו ואמר לו, כמה יין חי יש לך? אז הוא אמר, יש לי כדי לעשות רביעית הלוג.
רבע.
אם אתה מוזג בזה, אתה חייב. זה ההלכה. וכמה? 1 part yayin, 3 parts water. That's what it is.
מזיגת הכוס זה...
מזיגת הכוס אומרת...
כמה זה מלוג? 1/6 of a log?
16.
1/16 is מזיגת הכוס.
Exactly.
ומתוך מזיגת הכוס, מהאמאונט הזה, if you go a reva quarter already for יין חי חייב. less than that it's okay.
הבנת? כן?
זה חשבון, בקיצור.
Simple. Okay, good. Marava says Rava. What do you want to say?
לא, כי המוסדות של הרב יורם,
כן.
they left ש"ס. They don't want it anymore because there was a big balagan.
Okay.
So people come and said, hey, מה זה, you're gonna teach חשבון. I said, I'm not taking sleep with חשבון, can I help you to learn גמרא?
Good. Amar Rava, says Rava, so comes along Rava, and Rava says like this, I'll prove to you Shazah Pshat B'Mishnah. Meaning, you quoted a Braita. The Braita explains it's a course of Birkat HaMazon, and then you explained what does it mean, Rav Nachman or Rav Baruch. You explained that it has to be to be chayav for hotza'ah for yayin chai, it's 1/16, like we explained.
To be
chayav hotza'ah yayin chai.
1/16.
1/16 of a log. Why? Because that's the amount you make of.
No, 1/16 of a log is the shiur של כוס.
No.
1/16 of a log.
לא. רביעית. מה זה רביעית? רביעית is a quarter of a
זה
log.
רבע של
quarter
רביעית.
log. And from this רביעית,
In the revi'it, in your Kiddush cup, which let's say it's a revi'it, it's a very, actually we have, Baruch Hashem, we're a wealthy generation, so we have big cups, Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
But let's say it's a revi'it. The point is, 1/4 of the revi'it was yayin, and 3/4 of the revi'it was mayim.
yeah.
Which means how much of a lug is the yayin chai really? 1/16.
זה מאוד קטן, זה מאוד מרוכז.
4 times 4 is
כן.
16. Okay, fine. עכשיו,
כמו שאתה שם וויסקי
4
עם קולה.
3.5 ounces.
וויסקי עם קולה, יוחאי.
that's a revi'it.
כן,
maybe.
רביעית.
But you're talking about a quarter of the revi'it
כן.
now. So, okay. That's how much, if you carry that little
1
bit
ounce,
of
about
yayin,
1
maybe
ounce.
1 ounce, something like
1
that. I'm
ounce.
not sure exactly what the measure, but...
Shot.
What?
like a shot.
less.
It's
The
like
whole
a shot.
the whole chiyuv of revi'it, it's about 3.5 ounces.
You're
So
not carrying...
quarter from that.
אתה לא מוציא את המים, you're carrying
אני
that
לא יודע,
little
אבל
bit
אנחנו
of
לא יודעים
wine.
מה זה
That's
לוג.
it to be חייב
אה?
חטאת.
לוג, איך אתה יודע מה זה מידה של לוג?
יש לך מידה שלו, ברור.
We'll look it up after. Let's go. Amar Rav. Afana nami tanina. So Rav says, I'll tell you, that's the pshat. I'll prove it to you from the Mishnah. How do I know? Ayin zayin amud aleph. Because tanina, afana nami tanina, we learned in the Mishnah. What do we learn? Hamotzi yayin, it says in the Mishnah, if somebody carries out wine on Shabbat, this is our Mishnah. Kidei mizigat hakos. So it says, how much yayin liot chayav al hotza'ah shel hayayin hachay hazeh, kidei mizigat hakos.
Okay.
To mix the wine, to mix the cup. Okay.
So רבע רביעית.
Vitanya, 1 second, and the Braita that we quoted earlier explains, kidei mizigat kos yafeh. It has to be a kos yafeh. What's a kos
זה
yafeh?
קצת יותר.
It's the cup that you use for Birkat HaMazon. There's hidurim given, beautiful. Okay, that's, we explained already.
אוקיי.
Vikatani seifa, but what did the end of our Mishnah teach? Vish'al kol ha'mashkin b'revi'it. This was the Tanakama. So it says Rava, what do you see? the normal measure for all mashkim, you go out with coffee, you go out with orange juice, it's levi'it. And what are we saying? So what's the shi'ur chashuv usually for mashkim? It's levi'it. And what are we saying legabe yayin chai? We're saying it has to be kedei mizigat hakos. So obviously, what are we talking about in the Mishnah? Something that makes a revi'it, because that's considered shi'ur chashuv. But we're talking about less than a revi'it. How much are we talking about then? It must be we're talking about the amount of wine necessary, yayin chai, not itself being a revi'it, but rather the amount of yayin chai that's necessary to make from it a revi'it. Okay, so it's very simple. It says that's the pshat in the Mishnah. Okay. Very easy. Pashut. Nice. No, and the Gemara explains, one second. Rava letame, Rava follows his own shita. Marava kol chamra, any wine, de lo dari al chad tlat maya. If you don't mix together with it, al chad, one portion of wine, tlat maya, 3 portions of water. Lav chamra, he says that's not considered wine.
Lama.
Because it's too strong or too weak. It has to be. That's the measure.
So basically, you change the status of the wine once you mix it.
Yeah.
With the water, then it turns to a qualified wine.
Now it's considered proper wine, exactly. And that's what you use for kos shel bracha. That's the appropriate thing to use. So what's the point? Rava follows his own shita. Va'azu omer, ima mishnah amra lanu, that what's considered a shi'ur chashuv by mashkim is a revi'it. That's what the Mishnah says. Or shara mashkim. And it also teaches us in the Resha that kedei mizigat hakos. Obviously, it means enough wine kedei
לעשות רביעית.
לעשות רביעית מזה, אבל איך אתה עושה? עם המים. What's the mathematics according to Rava? It's 1 portion of wine, 3 portions of water. So therefore, you see that's the pshat in our Mishnah. Beautiful. Rava, very simple.
But there is no problem with this, the fact that there is no... זה לא דבר שאוכלים אותו או שותים אותו normally.
Oh.
You have to mix it first of all.
Abaye doesn't like what Rava is saying. החלוטה שלו.
אתה לא תאכל, אתה לא תשתה אותו ככה. אז איך אתה יכול להגיד שזה השיעור של היין, אם לא הרווחת אותו?
איך אתה חייב להוצאה בשבת, you brought out something that's חשוב.
נו, מי מצניע ככה את היין?
The problem is,
maybe
you
they
can't
do.
drink this thing straight.
But probably there is חשיבות.
So?
אמר Abaye says, שתי תשובות בדבר. רבה, חבר שלי, there's 2 questions on what you're saying. There's 2 problems with your pshat. Chada, first of all, the Tanan, there's a Mishnah in Mesechet Nida. The Mishnah in Mesechet Nida is discussing which, we know if a woman experiences dam nida, she becomes tmeya. But sometimes there's colors of the dam that are tmeya or that are not tmeya, or ta'ora. That's why sometimes you go to a chacham to ask, is the wife tmeya or ta'ora? So the Mishnah Nida explains to us what color, it's saying examples of a color that would be considered tmeya. And what does it say over there? Mishnah Nida says, V'amazug shnei chelkei mayim ve'echad yayin. It says there 2 parts water mixed with 1 part wine. That is min hayayin hashironi. This is like the wine that comes from Sharon, place in Eretz Yisrael, Sharon. Meaning what? And that color is sufficient to make a woman. If a woman has dam nida that looks like that color of wine, she's tmeya. But what do you see? How does it categorize wine over there?
1 against 2.
1 third.
So
1 third and 2
So
thirds.
Rabbi says, Rega, there's a Mishnah. Rabbi, you can't argue on a Mishnah. So how do you explain Pshat in the Mishnah is that it's 1/16 based on your cheshbon, that it's 1 to 3. Maybe it's really 1 to 2, like the Mishnah in Masechet Nida.
But this is a specific wine. You say yayin shironi.
Okay, that's a good answer already. I hear Shomea, but it seems to be saying
you categorize one wine, but מה הכלל אומר? מה, איפה?
But they cut to teach. It's come to teach something different. Here you learn a color.
Okay, excellent.
And here you learn when it's ready to drink. It's
Baruch
different
Hashem,
things.
there's going to be 2 answers and exactly those 2 answers. Baruch Hashem.
אני בא לי להגיד לך צבע כזה היא טמאה, זה צבע של טמא.
אבל רגע, אוקיי, איך אני מערבב את הצבע?
לוקח יין ככה שליש ומוסיף עליו 2 שלישים, הצבע הזה זה מטמא אותה, צבע כזה דומה. זה היין השירוני. אבל פה אני מדבר איתך יין שנוכל לשתות, זה משהו אחר לגמרי.
100%. הוא צודק, you're right.
Okay.
V'od comes along Abaye. Furthermore, so again, kasha number 1 is, you see the Mishnah Masechet Nida seems to say that the geder of yayin is actually more wine to water. You're saying it's less wine to water.
Okay. 1/3, no quarter.
But and furthermore, Mayin bekad umitztarfin? This is what Matan was asking. The water is still in the barrel, and you're saying it's mitztaref. Dainu, another way to say that is, the Mishnah is saying, why are you chayav for hotza'ah? Because it's chashuv. How can you say it's chashuv by itself? You can't even drink this. Because it's not with water yet. How can you be chayav in such a measure?
But it does have chashivut because at the end of the day, it's like food that you are going to store, like vushim, for example. At the moment that you want to eat it, you wouldn't eat it. Like, remember that we spoke about Mishnah with Rabbi Shimon that you actually put some fruits to dry, and then you wouldn't eat them, and then you eat them in outside, and they actually muktzeh or something. But there is chashivut for the wine here.
You're saying even though it's not drinkable like this, but it has chashivut.
But of course there's chashivut.
Show me. Amalei Rava, so says Rava. Rava says both answers like you both said. Rava says like this. Adika amrit. Your first question, Shnei chelkei mayim ve'echad yayin min yayin ashironi. Mishnah Nida says 2-to-1 is the measure. Oh, the answer is yayin ashironi lechud derafi. The wine that comes from Shironi, from Sharon in Eretz Yisrael, that's different. Why? The wine from there was weaker. So memela what? As memela ma? You only needed less water in order to mix with that type of wine. It's usually 3-to-1, not 2-to-1. That's not a kasha. Yochai said, obviously. It calls it there yayin ashironi. Obviously, that's different. Inami, or you could say another answer to that, which is what you were saying. Hata mishum chazuta. The Mishnah Nida is illustrating for us the color that would make a woman tmeya.
Okay.
Regarding the color, it says, okay, there's this yayin shironi you should know about that's considered the color of dam that would make a woman tmeya. But the taste of wine, you're going to need more. Meaning to say is there a need that we're talking about just the color? Legabe the color, so you could talk about what color is red that makes a woman tmeya. But legabe the ta'am of yayin is a different story. You can't compare the two of them, not a question. So that's the first question. I leave the second question. Yayin l'chai levad shouldn't have chashivut. Udika Amud mayim bekarim mitztarfin. So he says l'inyan Shabbat. No, l'inachinami. We could say regarding Shabbat, nidi de chashiv ba'inan. We need something that's important. V'hanami ka chashiv. And this ha-chashiv. This is important. Meaning having the raw wine by itself is considered chashuv, and therefore this would be considered a chiyuv of hotza'ah on Shabbat. I was thinking about it, by the way. We said in the Mishnah also with mayim. Remember we said by mayim, how much water to mix it in with the paste that you put on your eyes. So you could say the same thing there, is that the water there by itself is used. So I'm saying, you see from the Mishnah Kanireh that even if it has some chashivut to be used not by itself but with something else, it also is considered chashuv. So therefore Rava says that's not a problem. Okay, that's the end of this piece. So it comes out over here from this. In order to be chayav for yayin, chai, and Shabbat, it has to be a 16th of a lug that you're carrying. Why? Because with that amount of wine, you could make revi'it lug, which is a kos shel bacha, exactly. How much is that? We have to look it up after. I don't know how much that is tachlis. But anyways, okay. Now, let's move on over here. So now we're going to discuss, okay, so that was talking about wine that was in a liquid form. Liquid, lach, ken? Chshav, what happens if you leave wine? Okay, asita kos. As you put 1 chelek of wine, you put 3 chalakim of water, and then you left it there. And somehow it congealed. So it became what Rashi calls yayin kavush, congealed wine. I imagine it's
like fat. Did
like
you put it in the refrigerator? It's become mutzak.
You can't drink this like that.
No.
You can't drink it, right?
אז איזה חשיבות יש לו?
As how much of that will you be chayav for carrying on Shabbat? How much would be necessary to be chayav for carrying on Shabbat?
But there is any chashivut for wine that changes status from to congeal?
Yes. What's the chashivut of this?
מה החשיבות?
If you stick it in the heat or in the sun, what's going to happen?
It will melt again?
It will melt, become wine again. So there is some chashivut to this.
So probably the same amount. What's the difference? Just change the status of from like water that it's icy and then it's melt again.
So this is what Rabbi Natan's going to tell us here. Very interesting. Rabbi
The
Natan.
indication when it's become karush, it separates again the wine and the water.
So it seems like some of the liquid would evaporate, would leave it, and then it would become some sort of a...
It will be smaller amount?
Kanireh.
So there is like maybe a iteration?
Evaporation, kanireh.
Let's say you had like a 200 gram, now you have 180?
Maybe, yeah.
כי
התאדה.
How
אתה
much
יודע
would
למה,
it
אתה רואה את זה גם כן בקרח. אתה שם הרבה מים והוא קופא, ואחר כך שהוא מפשיר, יש לך כמה טיפות. אין רק איזה הרבה קרח בכוס.
כי הקרח מתנפח.
כי הוא קופא, הוא מוצק, ואז שהוא מנמס עוד הפעם,
So Rabbi Natan's
אולי
going to
קצת
say the
פחות.
following. Rabbi Natan's going to say, how much yayin karush do you need to carry to be chayav chatat? It needs to be the size of a kizayit.
כי זה נהיה כבר כמו... אבל איך, זה יותר קטן מגוגרת.
Very interesting.
Size of kazait?
Why kizayit? Because a kizayit of solid, of like ochel, is a revi'it of
של
liquid.
גוגרת?
הבנת את זה?
רביעית של liquid?
A kizayit of solid equals revi'it of liquid.
In the sizes? In the weight?
Exactly. If you melt it down, it'll be a revi'it of liquid.
רביעית או שליש? או third?
Revi'it of liquid.
So revi'it-
halog.
So רביעית of
That's what Natan's
liquid.
going to teach us. So in order, listen to this good. In order to be chayav on Shabbat for carrying yayin karush, this yayin yavesh that it dried up, it has to be a solid mass that equals a revi'it, which is a cup of wine, a full cup of wine, right?
רביעית?
Revi'it. Now, why does it have to be
רביעית זה דבר כזה.
למה זה צריך להיות revi'it? Before we said it has to be a quarter of a revi'it by liquid. So the answer is very simple. הבנת את זה?
לא.
By liquid, in order to be chayav, it only has to be yayin chai, a quarter of a quarter. To be chayav on Shabbat, to carry a solid amount of wine, it has to be equal to the liquid amount of a full revi'it.
זית אחד קטן?
כן, כזית.
איך אז...
כן, קטן.
אבל איך כוס שלמה?
הוא כבר יין מוכן, לא צריך לערבב אותו.
The answer is because what gives the yayin chashivut is that it's used for drinking.
No.
It could only be one step removed from that in order to have chashivut.
One step.
If it's two steps removed from that, it doesn't have chashivut. So what does it mean? If you're talking about liquid, so as long as you have the amount of wine that you can mix with water and then it's a proper cup, that's chashivut. Dahainu 1/16. But if you're talking about solid, you can't drink a solid piece of thing. So how do you drink this? You have to first go through the first step, which would be to melt it down, to let it Memela, it can't be that there's another step that you have to add water also. So therefore, in order to be chashuv, this is Rabbi Natan's shita, it has to be that there's enough of that solid yayin that once you melt it down, immediately it has its own chashivut. How does it immediately have its own chashivut? Because it's actually equal to a revi'it of wine itself. How is it equal to that if it's a kizayit of yayin?
but
Evanta
you said I have to mix it with water?
This you don't mix with water. Let's say
We're talking about the congealed wine.
you just need to melt it down, exactly. And then it's drinkable.
But it was with water.
Before.
אז איך זה הגיוני? כוס שלמה של יין.
You need to have the right full measure amount, so you're not going to make another step.
Exactly.
One step, just melt
Because
it.
otherwise, if it's two steps, it's not, it loses chashivut.
לא, אוקיי, let's say it became congealed and then you put it in the sun and then it's melt and...
Yeah.
Let's say for...
When it comes to yayin that's lach, regular wine, it already has chashivut if it's rova de revi'it. Lama? Because this is something, all you do is mix water and it's already drinkable. Masha'enken, if it's a karush like this is not drinkable.
For example, if you take in a yain chai karush, it's a problem.
Exactly, you wouldn't, not a problem.
Because it's two steps already.
Exactly. הבנת זה הפשט. Let's see that.
Because you have to melt it and then you have to put it.
You have to melt it and you have to mozeg
אז זה
it.
מפסיד החשיבות שלו. אם זה two steps removed.
We'll give you more example for that.
כמו גזירה לגזירה.
I don't know, I didn't think about it actually. I don't know. It has to, in order to have chashivut, it has to be that it's usable in one step. That's the key.
Because it's already, זה כבר לא...
אבל אני לא מצליח להבין את
זה קנייה כמו
measurement.
חומר גלם כזה.
The measurement I don't
It's like
understand.
Play-Doh. No, it's not really usable for
The measurement I can't really
לזרוק את זה.
track it.
The measurement?
כזית
Let's
מוצק.
just give for example. Let's say it's 1 ounce.
Okay, when we say כזית מוצק, לא זית, like olive.
The zayit is an olive.
So that's the measurement that we compare to
a revi'it of lach, exactly. Because maybe because solid is more packed together. Solid is more packed together, liquid is...
But the weight is the same thing. כמה שוקל זית קטן?
I believe it's volume. Volume, I believe. Yeah, let's see.
27 gram.
Tana, says the Braita, Yavesh b'kezayit, if it's wine that was congealed, means you had a proper cup of wine prepared, water and wine, and then it congealed, it has to be b'kezayit. Now, why is it kezayit? Because that would be equal to revi'it of yayin lach, div Rabbi Natan. And memela, that already is one step removed, so it would have chashivut for hotza'ah and Shabbat. Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef heard this psak of the Tana, Rabbi Natan, and he wanted to create a dimyon. He said, I'll show you, there's another Tana in Shas who holds similar to Rabbi Natan, in a different discussion altogether, but he holds a similar idea. What's the similar idea? That a kizayit of a solid measure is equal to revi'it of a liquid measure. That's what Rabbi Yosef is going to try to say. אני רוצה להסביר לכם, says Rabbi Yosef, שאני מצאתי מישהו אחר בש"ס, שגם סובר ככה, that a kizayit של אוכל, kizayit של solid, is equal to revi'it of liquid. That's what he wants to show. הבנת?
kizayit equal to revi'it?
זה מה אני שואל אותו שעה כבר.
Is equal to revi'it of liquid. That's what he's going to show. I'll show you. That's what Rabbi Natan is saying. That's what Rabbi Natan is saying. So Rav Yosef says, Amora, he comes after and he said, I want to show you, אני מצאתי מישהו אחר בש"ס, in Braitaot, Tana, who also holds the same way. Okay, he also holds...
So Rabbi Natan have to bring another source?
He just wants to show, Rav Yosef wants to show...
אבל הוא תנה בעצמו.
יש... מי תנה בעצמו? רבי נתן.
כן.
כן, אבל רב יוסף הוא המורה, הוא רוצה להסביר, he wants to show us, להראות לנו...
To prove.
There's another mikol for this. There's another Tana who exists that holds a kizayit of solid is equal to a revi'it of liquid. Oh, interesting. So let's see that inside. I'm Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Amud davar echad. So Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda said the same thing, meaning they both say that a kizayit of solid equals a revi'it of liquid. Rabbi Natan Adam Arant. Rabbi Natan, we already explained, we just said, is that in order to be chayav for carrying congealed wine, it has to be congealed wine that is equal to a revi'it of liquid. And how much is that? A kizayit of solid. So you see it's the same. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, now where do we see Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds the same thing? The Tanya, the Braita explains the following. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. The Braita says like this. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shisha dvarim mikulei beit Shammai umechumrei beit Hillel. We learned this actually, similar discussions earlier in the Masechta. 6 things. The Rashi explains actually there were more cases that were kulei beit Shammai and chumrei beit Hillel, but this is what Rabbi Yehuda was saying. That amongst the list were 6 more that were from kulei beit Shammai and chumrei beit Hillel. This was in Keren B'Yavna, if you remember. Fine. Usually beit Hillel is the mekil. But over here, beit Hillel, there's 6 examples that it was the machmir. One of the examples was Dam nevela. Okay, now let's just stop for a second. Nevela, an animal that died. Okay? Chshav, the basar of the animal is mitameh as an avatuma. It's an avatuma. How much of it is mitameh? Kizayit. Kizayit of the basar of the animal is mitameh as an avatuma. Fine. What about the dam? The dam of a nevela, dead animal. Okay? בית שמאי מתארים.
So אין לו בכלל סטטוס של טמא?
בית שמאי says it's tahor. Rashi brings 2 pshatim here. Either it means it's not mitameh like an av hatum'ah, but it is mitameh like a rishon hatum'ah, or another pshat that Rashi brings bichlal it's not mitameh.
מתארים.
Brings a machloket, but we're not going to get into that right now. Bekitzo, Beit Shammai says it's tahor. Let's not focus so much.
6 things that Beit Shammai is mekel.
ובית הלל מחמירים.
ובית הלל מחמירים. Usually the opposite. בית שמאי מודד.
So one of the examples is dam nevela. Again, basar shel nevela, an animal that died, is mitameh as an avatuma is a kizayit.
Enough.
Basar. What about the dam?
No.
It's machloket. Beit Shammai say tahor. It's machloket in Rashi. Rashi quotes 2 shitot.
Tarin.
Bichlal tahor, or meaning not even a rishon, or maybe it's a rishon, but it's not an avatuma. We're not going to get into that right
Beit Hillel
now. Beit Hillel mitamin. Beit Hillel say dam of an avela is mitameh. It is mitameh.
Okay.
Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. And that Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda said the following. Af keshetimu Beit Hillel. When Beit Hillel said dam nevela is mitameh, lo tim'u ela b'dam sheyesh bo revi'it. They only said if there's a revi'it of dam of a nevela that it will be mitameh. Ho'il v'yachol lekrosh v'la'amor al kezayit. Because if you would congeal the dam of the nevela, the blood of that dead animal, how much would it now be in a solid form? It would be kizayit. So says Rashi, what's the pshat? Because what's the mikar, that the way Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is explaining this is, why would we assume dam of a nevela is also mitameh? Because the basar of a nevela is mitameh. So therefore, whatever the measure for the basar is, we have to say it's the same measure for the dam, for the dam karush.
But how you can make this comparison between mashkim and ma'achalim?
So says Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, okay, if that's the case, how much dam is equal to kizayit basar?
How much dam?
אם אמרת רביעית דם,
אז
רביעית יין.
זה Rav Yosef HaAmora brought this to show. You see, there's another Tana, which is Rav Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the equivalent of Revi'it of Lach is Kizayit of Yavesh. Now, it's two different cases, the Gamre. Again,
עוד הפעם, זה כמו שהוא הביא את המשקרי עם היין והטמעה שאתה מערבב את זה במים, אז עכשיו לקחו עוד הפעם מקרה של טומאה וטהרה וחיברו את זה פה עכשיו לעניין של כמות, כמה אתה חייב בהוצאה.
כן, הבנת את זה?
זה קצת מסובך, אבל כן.
So Rabbi Yosef comes and Rabbi Yosef says, look, I'll show you. There's two Tanaim Shas that agree to the same Yesod. What's the Yesod? Is that if you have a Kizayit of Yavesh, it equals Revi'it of Lach. How do I know? Let's go through it again. Because the first one is Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Natan says that when it comes to hotza'ah Shabbat, in order to be chayav for carrying yayin karush, it has to be, how much does it have to be? Kizayit. Why does it have to be kizayit? Because that would be equal to a revi'it. Why does it have to be revi'it, by the way? Because then it's only one step removed from its chashivut. Fine. So it's chashuv. So you see Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Yosef, again the Amora, Rabbi Yosef is saying, Rabbi Natan the Tana holds that kizayit of Yavesh is equal to revi'it of Lach. And he says, and I'll bring you another mekor for this. Because Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda explains, Lama bet Shammai omrim, להיות tameh, מדam הנבלה, זה צריך להיות רביעית, because the mekor for dam nevela is the basar of the nevela, וכמה basar מנבלה צריך להיות זה tameh, it's kizayit, so you see also he holds the same.
אבל זה according to בית שמאי, בית הלל.
בית הלל, yeah, we're not getting into them achlokin now, but the point we're making here is, it's the same idea.
מוצק לך ומוצק.
Exactly. Kizayit of Yavesh or of Kalmut.
מוצק.
Mutzak is equivalent to Revi'it of Lach. That's what we're showing. Two different Tanaim that hold the same thing. So this is Rav Yosef's Chidush. Comes along Abaye, whose Abaye is the Talmid of Rav Yosef, and he says to his Rebbe Rav Yosef, Chilat Kvod Harav, I don't think he could compare one to the other. אני לא חושב שאתה יכול להידמות אחד לשני. You can't compare the Chidush of Rabbi Natan to the Shita of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. What's the difference?
פה בכלל.
Show us that for a second.
I thought about it.
What's the difference?
You're talking about טומאה and טהרה, and you're talking about hotza'ah.
Well, I don't hear the chiluk there. But think about the liquid you're talking about. What's the difference in the liquid?
זה דם וזה יין.
Oh, dam v'yayin. Which one is thicker? Dam or yayin?
Dam.
Dam is thicker. So what Rav Yosef, Abai is going to say to Rav Yosef is, you can't say these two Tanaim necessarily agree with each other. Maybe they don't agree with each other. Because the thicker nature of dam makes it that maybe let's just go one direction. Maybe Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda holds that a revi'it of dam is equal to a kizayit of yavesh. But that's because dam is thicker.
But wine maybe needs more?
So meaning he's going to say you can't necessarily say the two Tanaim agree with each other. Let's read that inside. It says you can't say they're the same shiur. Exactly.
But they also both, אחרי they become congealed.
Dam is heavier.
Amar Abaye, says Abaye, Rav Yosef, Dilma Lohi, says no, maybe that's not true. You can't make it this dimyon. Because Adkan lo ka'amar Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Natan only said here, Legabe hotza'ah b'Shabbat b'yayin karush, de'ba'ir revi'it el b'yayin de kalish. Maybe there, in order for it to be a full kizayit, it has to be a revi'it of in order for it to be a revi'it, it has to be a kizayit of yayin kalush. Why? El b'yayin de kalish, because yayin is thinner. Yayin is kalish, it's thinner. So therefore, in order for it to be a kizayit, you're going to need
more.
In order to be a revi'it, it has to be a kizayit of yayin karush. Aval bedam de samich, but maybe regarding blood, which is a thicker type of thing.
So dam is less?
What's that?
Dam is less or wine is more?
No, it's thicker. So therefore, Adam de Samich, Kezayit lo ba'i revi'it. Then in order to be a Kezayit, you might not need a
כן, נו, אז משהו חייב להיות או זה או
less than a
זה.
revi'it would also be a Kezayit. So therefore,
It's heavier.
Dam is thicker. It's
Okay,
heavier,
Samich,
exactly.
Samich.
So Memela, you wouldn't need a revi'it. Maybe it's even less than a revi'it that would be considered a Kezayit. Inami, and let's go the other way. Ad kan lo kam Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda only says atam by dam nevela. The kezayit sagile bervit that a kezayis would be equal to a revi'it. Ela bedam nesamich because blood is thicker. Yain de kalish, but maybe wine which is thinner. Kezayit have yoter me revi'it. Maybe a kezayit of this yain karush would actually end up being even more than a revi'it. And even if you take less than a kezayit, then maybe you should be chayav because that would already be considered a revi'it. So therefore, what the Gemara says, הבנת? כן?
לא, הקטע הזה, I cannot say no.
הבנת את זה? Let's go over it outside for a second. Oh, you have to go now?
No, I have to...
Let's go over it outside for a second. Let's put it together like this. According to... Let's start with Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Natan, what did he say? He said that in order to be chayav for hotza'ah and yayin karush, it has to be a revi'it of yayin.
כן.
How much yayin karush is a revi'it of
A
yayin?
quarter of...
לא.
כזית.
Kazait.
כזית מוצק.
Kama yayin mutzak is equal to a revi'it of lach is kazait.
כמה יין מוצק?
Is equal to a revi'it of lach.
לך? רביעית
יין
לך?
מוצק הוא רביעית של לך. כשהוא הופך להיות לך, אם הוא לא רביעית, אתה לא חייב בו. אם הוא רביעית, אתה חייב בו.
אוקיי. יין מוצק צריך להיות רביעית של לך. אוקיי.
אבל עכשיו...
אבל איך אתה יודע שאתה מוציא אותו? How do you know?
אז עכשיו, רבי יוסף רוצה להגיד שהוא יסכים עם רבי יוסי ברבי יהודה. Because what did רבי יוסי ברבי יהודה say? מה אמר רבי יוסי ברבי יהודה?
הדם של הנבלה.
הדם של הנבלה מה?
רביעית של דם שווה ככזית מוצק.
Exactly. So מסתם, רבי
ואיך אתה משווה יין?
הוא מסכים לרבי יוסי ברבי יהודה.
הבעיה חולק עליו.
מה היסוד? שרביעית של לך equals כזית של מוצק, תודה. אוקיי? אז בא אביי ואומר לו, זה לא צודק. You can't compare one to the other, יכול להיות שהם חולקים זה על זה.
אולי דם פחות.
Why? איך אני יודע?
Thicker.
Because since dam is thicker,
Heavier.
as let's go both directions. Let's start off first this way. Rabbi Natan says that a kezayit of karush is equal to revi'it.
A זין of karush.
Kezayit of karush is equal to revi'it, כן?
כן.
רביעית של מה?
רביעית מוצק.
רביעית מוצק. לא.
לא, סליחה.
לא.
כזית מוצק שווה רביעית לך.
Exactly.
זית מוצק שווה רביעית לך.
Exactly. But why is that? Because why? Because yayin is thinner. Thinner than dam.
Yes.
Oh. But maybe when it comes to dam,
צריך פחות דם.
צריך
פחות מרביעית לך של דם.
meaning in order to fill the measure of what?
less than רביעית לך of דם. פחות מרביעית של לך בדם. כי הדם הוא סמיך יותר.
פחות מכזית מחייב. Why פחות מכזית? Because since exactly, it would still be a רביעית. Meaning even פחות מרביעית, exactly. מה פחות מכזית לחייב, exactly. Because even less than a כזית of this
אז הוא מבטל את מה שרב יוסף אומר פה?
רגע, I'm getting confused a little bit, one second.
דם קרוש.
נו, help me out here, תעזור אותי.
דם קרוש, simple, דם קרוש, אוקיי, כזית. אבל then Abaye reject it and say, how come that it's דם קרוש is a כזית? דם קרוש is much more, is heavier, so it might be that actually because the yain is kalush and the blood is much thicker, then you don't need רביעית. You need less than that. You need less than כזית.
I think so.
less than כזית.
Sorry about it.
אין לי מרקר, one second. No.
מרקר.
One second. Alright, here we go.
Now in business.
Now we're in business. Okay, Baruch Hashem, in business.
We have to happen, you know?
Hashem.
בעזרת השם.
We have here
בכבוד.
Rabbi Natan.
Rabbi, you want to put it in the other way because it's easier for you to write it down?
No, it's okay.
אבל הבנת?
לא הבנתי.
הדם הוא יותר סמיך.
הבנתי.
אז אתה צריך פחות דם.
What does Rabbi Natan say?
בשביל שהוא יהיה חייב בהוצאה.
הבנתי, אבל זה שורה תחתונה.
לא.
אתה מבין? זה הצ'ק למטה.
הוא לא יכול להשוות את הסיטואציה בין היין לדם. זה מה שהוא אומר פה.
הבנתי את זה. אבל אני צריך to have the whole מהלך, אתה מבין?
אז לכתחילה, למה בכלל רב יוסף מביא שתי ברייתות? אם מביא לך ברייתה אחת, מספיק, מה, ויש לך ברייתה? מה?
מביא את ליקוויד, לך.
Exactly. And what does he say here?
רבי יוסי ורבי יהודה.
What does Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda say?
יוסי ורבי יהודה לגבי הלך בית שמאי בית הלל.
רביעי.
לך.
דם קרוש.
שווה. כזית. מוצק.
Okay, fine. עכשיו, Rabbi Yosef wanted to say they seem to be holding of the same shita. That the rule is that a revi'it of lach equals a kezayit of mutzak.
יפה.
Easy.
זה לא, הם לא חולקים?
אוהב את רבי יוסף.
הם לא חולקים?
אבל comes אביי, and he says...
לא,
לא.
אביי כביכול חולק על הרב שלו.
זה לא צודק. Means they don't necessarily agree with each other. ולמה?
הברייתאות.
Yayin is thinner and dam is thicker.
Who brought this? A brighter? Both of my
יש שתי ברייתאות.
Who brought it?
רב יוסף.
Rabbi Yosef.
What did he try to prove?
He wanted to show that Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Natan.
שרבי יוסי ורבי
אז
יהודה.
בא התלמיד שלו, אביי, ואומר שזה לא צודק. זה לא necessarily true. למה לא? Because maybe Rabbi Natan says like this. Maybe Rabbi Natan says that a kizayit of mutzak is equal to revi'it of lach.
ביין.
But by yayin, why by yayin? Because yayin is thinner.
Yes.
So therefore you need a revi'it of lach in order to equal kizayit of mutzak.
Okay, שהלך זה היין במקרה הזה.
Okay,
Okay,
exactly.
Okay.
But maybe by dam, which is thicker,
You can't compare it.
why not?
Because
כי הדם הוא סמיך יותר.
So therefore, maybe to make a kizayit, how much do you actually
Less.
need?
Less.
So that's what the Gemara says. Very nice. So let's read that inside now. Let's read it.
No, כמו...
אמר אביי, דילמה לא יקנו כמה רבי נתן אחא.
איפה אתה? מחילה.
Let's read it inside again. אמר אביי.
איפה זה?
בוא.
אמר אביי, דילמה לא יקנו כמה רבי נתן אחא, דבאי רביעית, אלא ביין דקליש, because wine is thinner. אבל בדם דסמיך כזית לא באי רביעית. כדי למלאות הכזית, אפילו פחות מרביעית מספיק. הבנת? הנה in the other direction, עד כאן לא
או
כמה.
אמור, מה? מה עכשיו הוא מנסה להגיד?
הוא רוצה להגיד, וגם להפך אתה לא יכול להגיד. דהיינו, שרבי יוסף רבי יהודה, לאו דווקא שהוא יסכים עם רבי נתן. The same logic, just the opposite now.
אמרנו את זה.
לא, עכשיו הוא אמר, איך רבי נתן לאו דווקא מסכים לרבי יוסי ורבי יהודה, אבל עכשיו הוא רוצה להגיד,
הופך את זה.
רבי יוסי ורבי יהודה לאו דווקא
ההפוך
יסכים
בה
עם
וההפוך
רבי
בה.
נתן. הנה מיד כאן לא כמה רבי יוסי ורבי יהודה תם, בידם נבלה. דכזית סגי ברביעית, that a kizayit is filled by a רביעית, that a kizayit המוצק equals רביעית, אלא בדם דסמיך, that's because dam is thicker. אבל יין דקליש, regarding wine which is thinner,
הבנתי. הוא יש לו
כזית
כאן...
אף יותר מרביעית. If you take a כזית, it's actually going to end up being, it has to be more than a רביעית.
אז הוא חולק על הזה,
וכי
הוא חולק
מפיק
על זה.
פחות מכזית לחייב. And therefore on Shabbat, if you would go out with less than a כזית, you should even be חייב.
יפה. אז זה הוא חולק על זה וזה חולק על זה.
Alright, should we go a little bit ahead? We have a few more minutes. Yes, it's 5 minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
This next Gemara is very easy.
Yeah.
Very simple, very straightforward. You have to go, Natan?
Soon, yeah, but
Yeah,
5 minutes, 5 minutes.
because I also have to pick up my daughter today, so
Okay, 5 minutes or no? If you don't
5
have it,
minutes.
it's okay.
5
minutes.
minutes,
Just
yeah.
finish this last. It's very easy,
Okay.
very straightforward.
חלב
What we're going
כדי
to do
גמיעה.
now is we're going to go through different places in Shas where a certain word is used. Again, and since they used to, it was Baal Peh. So there was a word that had a letter that wasn't clear. Was it Aleph or was it Ayin? So they discussed in the Beit Midrash. They wanted to know. The Talmidim were discussing which one is it.
גמיעה.
So the first one, the reason we bring it here is because in the Mishnah we said Chalav Kedei Gimiyah. How much milk to be chayav for hotza'ah? Kedei Gimiyah, to swallow. By the way, Tosfot quotes what Natan mentioned yesterday. Perish Harav Rabbeinu Porat, he says, Malolugma. Actually, it's a chikfo, but Tosfot says doesn't seem to be that's the pshat. But either way you learn it. There is this lashon of kedei gemi'ah. Kedei gemi'ah. How do you read kedei gemi'ah? So, by the way, the question was like this: kedei gemi'ah or kedei gemi'ah? אני אמרתי את זה כמו אשכנזי. אבל אם אתה ספרדי, איך אתה...
גמיעה.
So...
עין.
כדי גמיעה, כדי גמיעה.
אגמיעיני, או אגמיעיני.
It's the same word. בעצם it's a very similar word, but that was the question. They wanted to know.
You see the מחלוקת start from there already.
It's not really. The third says, in the way to write it, כולי על ממודי, there has to be a proper way to write it. So how do you write it? With an
But usually, אתה יודע מי גומע מים? הבהמה.
No.
היא גומעת.
With an ayin.
עם עין.
So in the Mishnah it wrote it with an ayin, but the she'ela was, when they wrote this Mishnah, is this dafka, is it with an ayin or with an aleph? That was the question. So Amar Nachman by Yitzchak, Hagmi'eni na me'at mayim mikadeh. Eliezer Amar leRivka, Hagmi'eni na me'at mayim mikadeh. Let me drink, let me swallow a little bit of water from your pitcher. And how is it written there in the Torah?
עם א'.
With an aleph. So he says the proper girsah should be with an aleph. Our Mishnah writes it with an ayin. So apparently they weren't makbid on this because it could be written both ways. But if you want to know the right thing, it's with an aleph. Interesting thing. That's actually the right way to do it. Ibayilu, a similar question. Ayin zayin amud bet. Gar'inin or gar'inin? Again, aleph or ayin. What's it talking about? Amanu ba Mishnah, ayin vav amud bet. Before the end of the parak, we said, הכל מצטרפים לשיעור גוגרת when it comes to אוכלים, חוץ מגרעינים. How do you write גרעינים? Is it with an aleph or is it with an ayin, the pits? So Marav Bar Ula, the pasuk, it also says, and this is a pasuk that talks about if somebody is makdish his property that he inherited from all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So there's a certain cheshbon given how much he has to pay to redeem it from hektish. It says over there, if a certain amount of years pass by, you take away from the amount. So it says, v'nigra me'akecha. You diminish, you take away from your value, from how much you have to pay. So Rashi speaks out over here, the gar'inim, it's an amazing thing. It's gorea from the ochel, meaning if you measure the ochel, it diminishes the flesh of the date, of the fig, v'chudei. So Garinim are called that based on diminishing, taking away. It is not part of the flesh of the fruit.
Makes sense.
So, Giraon,
exactly. So you see it's with an ayin. That's the point. You see, Garinim, it's mafsid. It takes away from the ochel. Ibayilu, another question. Omemot or omemot? And this is based on a Gemara. Gechalim. It's based on a Gemara Masechet Pesachim Ayin Hey Amud Bet. The Gemara there is talking about Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur would take some of the coals, gechalim, from the mizbeach, and he would enter into Kodesh HaKodeshim.
I think so. And why? Because that's what you call Am Haaretz. Am Haaretz gechalim omemot. That's how we
the word the Gemara uses omemot is diminishing coals. Is that the fire is going down, but they're still glowing. That's what omemot is. You want to know, are the coals that there's discussing over there, actually not allowed to use that, but is it with an ayin or with an aleph?
But writing, spelling, and reading also, or praying, it's you learn how important it is.
True.
People reading sometimes the word, it's a different word.
True.
Very important.
100%. Pronunciation is very important.
Very important.
Pasuk in Yecheskel. What does it say? This is, the psukim are talking about the gadlut, the greatness of Malchut Ashur. Malchut Ashur. Mamlachat Ashur, the kingdom of Ashur. And the pasuk there says in Yecheskel, it says, Arazim lo amamuhu began Elokim. Like cedars, it wasn't diminished or going out like cedars began Elokim in the garden of Hashem. So the way that Mefarshim explained this is, the arazim that were planted in Gan Eden, Malchut Ashur is even greater than them. That's what it's saying. But Lo Amamu means those cedar trees don't diminish Malchut Ashur. They don't take away from Malchut Ashur because of the greatness of Malchut Ashur. But you see, it's like the coals going out. It's with an ayin and not with an aleph. Final question, Ibaylahu. Me'amtzin or me'amtzin? We're going to learn later in the Masechta, Bezat Hashem, that we know a met. No, Alena, we shouldn't know, but a met and kufnan aleph and a bit. It's interesting because we just quoted that yesterday. The difference of what did we say? We called it Agagala Chozeh Ba'olam. It's also Kufnan Aleph Mubet. We did that yesterday, but it's a different point there. Me'amtzin Tanan, it says if somebody passes away on Shabbat, the body is muktzeh. You're not allowed to move it. So it says over there, you're not allowed to be me'amtzin. You're not allowed to close his eyes.
נחשב כאילו הורגו, רוצחו.
No, he's passed away.
No,
אסור לגעת בו, אסור לגעת בו.
if somebody is very very גוסס, and somebody מעצם את עיניו, כאילו רצח אותו.
אבל אני חושב שזה מדבר על העניין של מוקצה, אחרי שהוא כבר מת, אני חושב שם. We'll see it there. The point is it with an aleph or with an ayin? So Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, ve'otzen einav me'od berah. The pasuk in Yeshaya says, what is a tzaddik who could defend Am Yisrael from the anger of Hashem?
Close your eyes.
Somebody that looks away from bad things. Shomer einayim, looks away. So you see it's with an ayin, that's the right way to say me'amtzin with an ayin. Stop with the two dots.
חזק וברוך.
זה של הבית כנסת?
כן.